Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our first UCLA Cares About Anxiety series webinar. My name is Anna Alkozei, and I'm a clinical specialist in the UCLA Care Center, which stands for Child Anxiety Resilience Education and Support. And this talk is titled Not Just Deep Breaths. So we're going to talk about ways that teens can manage stress and anxiety better. And I know we have a lot of teens on the call, but I also know we have some parents and some teachers on the call. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you all here. A couple of things, a couple of things just about the webinar today. We've turned your camera and mics off. If you have any questions though, please utilize the chat function. So at any time during the webinar, if you have a question, just type it in the chat. You can either send it to everyone so everyone can read it, or if you'd rather not everyone read it, you can also chat directly to the Care Center person. This is our communications specialist, Valerie, who will be monitoring that chat. So please feel free to chat the Care Center, or if you have any technical issues as well, you're welcome to do that as well. During the webinar, we'll be using a couple of polls, and that just means there will be some questions and you can answer them, and it's completely anonymous, and you'll then be able to see the results. We'll just do that a couple of times, and you're welcome to join in. That would be really great. So I think that was all of the logistics. So we'll start with a little bit of a game that I called Who Said It? And what I will do is I will put up a quote in here, and you can guess using the polls, you can guess who might have said it, who of these different celebrities. Okay, so here it is. School was a big source of anxiety for me. I hated school. I have social anxiety, and it developed when I was a kid. I had trouble going to birthday parties. I wasn't being bullied. There was no particular reason. Okay, so I'm going to start the first poll, and you can guess. Who do you think might have said that? Do you think it was Emma Stone, or Lily Reinhardt, or Ryan Reynolds, or Shawn Mendes? So I'll just give you a couple minutes to take a guess. And it's really a guess, right? It could have been any of them. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds if anyone else wants to take a guess. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. I hope you guys can see that. The majority of people guessed Emma Stone, and second close was Lily Reinhardt. So we'll see who actually said it. Okay. So, oh my goodness, sorry. Okay, it was Lily Reinhardt who said that. Okay, so she had a really big problem with going to school. That was her sort of source of anxiety. Okay, next one. So she's out of the game now. The first time I had a panic attack, I was sitting in my friend's house and I thought the house was burning down. I called my mom and she brought me home. And for the next 3 years, it just wouldn't stop. Okay, who do you think might have said that? So we only have 3 in the game now. Emma, Ryan, or Shawn. Okay. I'll give you a couple more. Okay, we have a lot of people have participated. Okay, I'll give you another 5 seconds if anyone else wants to take a guess. Okay, I'll share the results. And the majority of you thought it was Emma Stone. So we'll see if you were right. And you were right. That was Emma Stone. So Emma Stone has talked a lot about her difficulties with anxiety and with panic attacks in particular. Okay, so we have 2 left in the game. I have anxiety. I've always had anxiety, both in the lighthearted, I'm anxious about this kind of thing. And I've been to the depths of the darker end of the spectrum, which is not fun. Okay, so this is the last poll we'll do because then we kind of know who it was. But who do you think might have said this one, Ryan or Sean? Oh, yeah, it's launched, right? Okay, anyone else want to participate? Last chance. Okay, I'm going to end it and I'm going to share the results. And it was Ryan, you guys guessed Ryan Reynolds. So we'll see if you were right. And I think you might have been right. It was Ryan Reynolds who said that. So I'm not going to make you guess the last one. This is Shawn Mendes who said that, but I'm still going to read it. So he said, I still struggle with anxiety, but just remember every day that everyone deals with some level of anxiety or pressure. We're all in it together. And so the reason why I stopped with Shawn Mendes' quote is that if you don't remember anything else from this talk today, this is what I want you to take away from, that we're all experiencing uncomfortable situations in life that will make us feel difficult emotions, right? So all of us will experience some kind of discomfort. We are experiencing arguments with friends, not getting something we really wanted, getting rejected by someone, getting physically hurt, and smaller things, right? Like being late for school or getting a bad grade. All of these things are uncomfortable. And all of us are going to experience some uncomfortable situations in our lives. Maybe not all of us are going to experience all of these things, right? But it's inevitable that we're all going to experience situations where we feel like, oh my goodness, this was stressful. And some of us are going to experience even more distressing situations like real trauma. And even then, you're not alone. There will be other people who would have experienced a similar kind of struggle. That also means that we're all going to experience some difficult emotions, right? Things like shame or depression or anger or guilt, right? We may not all experience all of these things at any given moment, but just by being human, it means we will experience some of these feelings at certain times in our lives. And again, some of us might be more prone to feeling anger rather than feeling guilt, right? But all of us are going to experience some kind of uncomfortable emotions that are difficult for us to hold. We're also all going to experience some really uncomfortable thoughts, right? So things like, oh my God, people will think I'm stupid, or I'm an idiot, or oh my goodness, I shouldn't have said that. Or if I go to this party, no one will talk to me. What if I fail? What if this other horrible thing happens? And again, we're all diverse. We're not all have exactly the same thoughts, all of those thoughts, but we're all going to experience some thoughts that we will find distressing. And so if you don't remember anything else from this talk, just remember that experiencing difficult emotions is part of being human. And whatever you're going through, there are other people going through something similar as well, or have in the past, or will in the future, right? You're not alone in what you're experiencing. And the reason for that is that our mind is like an alarm system, right? It's trying to keep us safe. And our mind has a really hard time distinguishing between a tiger that's chasing us, right? Or an argument with a friend. Our mind sees both of these things as a threat to our safety and wants to keep us safe. And in this case, right, keeping us safe would be running away from the tiger. And in general, our mind is a really great problem-solving machine. So it's trying to get rid of these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings in whatever way possible. And so often what it does is it's telling us to do something to push away these difficult thoughts and emotions that we're experiencing, right? And you can imagine that being a little bit like having a beach ball that you're trying to push underwater. You're trying to not think about certain things. You're trying to not feel certain things, right? Kind of like people tell us, just don't worry about it. Just don't think about it. Don't get upset. Don't get angry. And so you're trying to keep these thoughts and feelings at bay, so to speak, right? But you can see from this old person, that's really exhausting, right? They're really sweating and using up a lot of energy to do that. So I'm going to give you a real life example. So imagine you're studying for a test. You start studying and you realize, oh my goodness, this is a lot of material. Yeah. And then you start to worry, oh my goodness, what if I don't finish studying all of this? What if I fail the test? What if I fail the class? And then all of a sudden your mind starts to spin and worry about failing high school and not being able to go to college. And you're sort of in this worry spiral. And rationally, you know that's not really true, right? You know that these worries are not really true, but you're sort of so caught up in these worries. So if we're trying to study for this test and we're starting to worry a lot about it, then what we might want to do is we might want to do something to take our mind off of it, right? We might start to want to do certain things to not think about these things anymore. So one thing we might do is that we might watch Netflix for a couple of hours, right? And so during that time where we're watching Netflix, we won't think about the test anymore, right? We won't think about these worries and all of those negative feelings that come with that. The difficulty is that as soon as we stop watching Netflix, all of these thoughts and feelings sort of come rushing back at us, right? And we couldn't really avoid them for too long. And the other thing is that it makes things more difficult in that now that we used up all of our time and our energy to sort of avoid these difficult thoughts and feelings by maybe watching Netflix all day, what ends up happening is that then we might find more time to study, for example, and then that makes things really difficult for us in the long run. And also, it's really hard for us to just not think about something, right? That's not really how our mind works. If we tell our mind, just don't think about something, that's nearly impossible for our mind to do. So we can do a little experiment here, right? So if I tell you, don't think about chocolate cupcakes, and you can close your eyes if you want, right? If you don't want to look at them, you can do that. But just whatever you do, don't think about chocolate cupcakes. Don't think about the chocolatey frosting on top. Don't think about the crunchy sprinkles on top. Don't think about the moist cake underneath. Don't think about how rich the chocolatey taste might be. So I think it's really hard in that moment to not think about chocolate cupcakes, right? Just by telling yourself even to not think about it, it means that you're going to start thinking about it to some extent. And so that is the same what will happen if you tell yourself, just don't worry about this and this, right? Your mind then immediately starts to think about it in that moment. The same might happen is if I tell you, Mary had a little, I think for all of us, the thought that pops into our mind is lamb, right? Mary had a little lamb. It's really hard for us to sort of not think, or impossible for us to not think about lamb. That's sort of how our brain works. It automatically finishes that sentence for us. And in the same way, it's really hard to control what the next thought is that might pop into our mind. The other big question is, can we really control all of our emotions at a drop of a hat, right? And I'm not saying we can't ever control how we're feeling to a certain extent, right? If I now start watching a funny movie, I might start to laugh and feel happy. But oftentimes we tell ourselves, just don't be anxious, just don't be scared, just don't be worried. And the question is, if we're really able to do that like that at the drop of a hat. And so imagine I gave you $1 million to madly and truly fall in love with the next person that walks into my office right now. Do you think you would be able to do that? And you'd be really motivated to do that, right? You'd be really motivated to be able to do that because you could win $1 million. But it's probably, I would argue, impossible that you could do that at the drop of a hat, right? In an instant, to bring yourself to feel such a strong emotion. And in the same way, it's also really hard for us to just suppress or shut down a really strong emotion. And yet we're often trying to tell ourselves, just don't be scared. So what is it? So the question is then, what is it that we can control, right? And I would argue one thing we can control is our behavior, is what we do, is our actions. And so imagine you're this little girl, here's this little girl, and she's driving a bus, right? And so this bus is sort of driving through her life. She's driving this bus through her life, and she gets to decide where to go. So she gets to decide, I'm going to study for the test, or I'm going to watch Netflix. But she has all of these unruly passengers on this bus, right? And you can see that they really don't seem to be very friendly. And these passengers are sort of these thoughts and feelings that she has. And there might even be some that are nice, right? There might be some thoughts and feelings that are helpful, that are telling her to study for the test. But there are also some that maybe are not very helpful, right? So there's a thought that says, nobody likes you, right? And these passengers try to tell her what to do. They try to tell her maybe to not go to the birthday party, even though she was invited, right? Or to, not study for the test because she will fail anyway. And so the difficulties, though, or the nice thing, maybe I should say, is that she doesn't have to listen to these passengers. So she doesn't have to listen to these thoughts and feelings. They cannot actually come in and take over the steering wheel. They can tell her where to go, they can scream at her, but they cannot actually make her do anything that she doesn't want to do. And so here's the sort of big question. If you didn't have these painful thoughts and feelings, and let's for good measure put in as well, if everyone you knew would like you no matter what you did, what would you actually do, right? So if you were the bus driver in your life and you didn't have to listen to those painful thoughts and feelings, let's say you didn't have them, what would you do then? And this is a really big question. And you might say now, well, I don't really feel like I can do these things right now because these thoughts and feelings are really strong. And that's a fair point. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of skills where we can create a little bit of distance between ourselves and these thoughts. Because the reality is thoughts are not facts, right? Some thoughts might be true, some thoughts may not be true, but thoughts are not facts, and they're not rules, and they're not commands, right? So we're going to do another little experiment here, and I can't see any of you, but hopefully you'll do this with me. And so I just want you to have a thought, really, truly have a thought. I cannot raise my right arm. I cannot raise my right arm, cannot raise my right arm. And now raise your right arm, okay? And so you had a thought that you couldn't raise your right arm, but you were able to do it anyway. And you might say now, well, yeah, because I didn't really believe that thought, right? I didn't really buy into that thought. And that is exactly right. And so we're going to try and do that with thoughts that are a little bit more painful. And so this is the skill, and it's called unhooking from your thoughts. And we're going to practice that with a word that is not very painful, just to practice this skill. So when you think of the word milk, right, if you think of that sound, of that letter combination, you're probably going to think of something like this. And the reason why you're thinking of that is because over time you have learned that the sound milk means something like that. And that is the same for thoughts that are really painful, right? So the reason why the word idiot is really painful is because we have attached a certain meaning to that word. And if we get really sort of hooked with that thought, if we get really enmeshed with that, then that starts to really be really painful for us. And then it's really hard to do something other than what this thought is telling us to do. But so if you read this word, unless you know Hindi, you might not know what this means, right? This actually means milk as well. But if you saw the word idiot written in a different language, it might also not bring up these painful feelings because we have not attached that sort of meaning to that thought. Okay. And so what we can do is we can take away some of that meaning of that word that we find, or of that word, or of that thought, of that sentence that we find really stressful by doing a couple of exercises. Okay. Now, I welcome you to do this with me. And what you can do is you can just turn off, I'll tell you in a second, you can just turn off my volume if you want to practice this with me, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to just say the word milk over and over and over again for 30 seconds. And then we're going to see what just happens to that word. Okay. And so if you want to do this practices with me, you can just mute me. And I will say it as well. And if you don't want to do it with me, you can just listen to me as I will do it. Okay. Milk, 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 milk. Milk, 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 milk. milk, 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 milk. Okay. And so if you've done this, what happened to the sound milk, right? All of a sudden, it might have lost some of its meaning. All of a sudden, it sounds kind of weird. And we don't really know if it's even really a word anymore, right? And the same thing can happen if you do this with a word or a sentence that's really painful to you, right? So things like I'm an idiot or any other thought where you feel really, really sort of hooked by. You can practice this skill and create a little bit of separation, because the reality is that is a thought. It's not a fact. And the reason why this is so painful is because we have attached so much meaning to that thought. And just by creating a little bit of separation between ourselves and that meaning, we can open up a tiny window where we can act in a different way. But this skill might not be for everyone, right? I completely very aware that is a little bit silly, but it is backed by science that helps a lot of people. But there are other skills to create a little bit of separation between yourself and your thoughts as well. And so we're going to practice a very different skill that has a similar effect by just creating a little bit of distance between ourselves and the thoughts. We're basically going to try to just observe our thoughts from the outside. So we're going to practice this meditation. It's called Leaves on a Stream. And so if you feel comfortable, I'm going to ask you to just come to a comfortable position. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes and picking a spot right in front of you, or picking a spot right in front of you. You can also watch the video as well if you feel more comfortable doing that. But I will guide you through it, and it will be about 2 minutes, okay?
Exercise 3.
Sorry. So just to come to a comfortable seat, take a deep breath in and a long breath out. And then start to picture yourself next to a gently flowing stream. And on this stream are a couple of leaves. And they're just sort of floating by. And just watch that for a moment, taking deep breaths in and long breaths out. And now notice your mind. And notice that you might be having thoughts. And so whenever a thought comes into your mind, place it on a leaf and just watch it float by. And then another thought might come into your mind and you place it on a leaf and you watch it float by. These can be all kinds of thoughts that you might think are good, thoughts that you might think are bad, neutral thoughts, any kind of thought that comes into your mind. Put it on a leaf and just watch it float by. And this could look really different. You can maybe see the words written on a leaf, or you just see nothing really. You just know that the words are put on this leaf and they're floating by. Whatever that might mean to you. Sometimes the same thought can come up over and over again. So whenever that happens, put it on a leaf and watch it float by. Even thoughts like, I don't really want to be doing this exercise, or this is silly. You can put those thoughts on leaves as well and watch them float by. And whenever your mind starts to wander, whenever you might notice you're getting caught up in these thoughts, you're trying to argue with them, try to catch yourself and then put those thoughts on leaves. Don't judge yourself when your mind does wander. It happens to all of us. And don't judge any of the thoughts that are coming into your mind. Just let them be. Just observe them from the outside. And then slowly finishing the exercise, take another deep breath in and a long breath out. And then when you're ready, coming back to the room, opening your eyes and to the presentation. So with this exercise, right, what we have done is we're just observing our thoughts. We're not trying to argue with our thoughts. We're not trying to change them. We're just sort of letting them be there without getting really caught up with them, right? So these are two things people use. There are a couple of other ways to sort of unhook yourself from these thoughts as well. If you're somebody who, like the milk example, right? Or if you want to try that with a thought that's more painful, you can also try different things, right? So you can sing your thought to a tune that is really removed from the meaning. So something like to the tune of Happy Birthday, or in a really funny voice. And what happens there as well is that the meaning, the harsh meaning of a word gets sort of reduced by putting it into a completely new context that we're not used to. Another really classic thing, right, is to write down your thoughts. Again, by that, you're taking your thoughts that are sort of just in your head, and it feels like you are these thoughts out on a piece of paper. And so you can see them and observe them from the outside. You can also be really creative and imaginative. And I think you guys could be more imaginative than me, but you can imagine your thoughts on a computer screen and change the font and the color and the size and maybe move them around. Again, just to create a little bit of separation between yourself and the thoughts. So this is the second takeaway, is to try to create some space between yourself and your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. And your thoughts are not facts or rules that you have to obey. And by creating a little bit of space between yourself and your thoughts, they won't have as much control over your actions. The next skill we're going to practice is when we're feeling really overwhelmed with negative emotions. And I'm going to walk you through what we'll do, and then we'll practice it together. But I'm going to ask you first to think back to a slightly difficult memory, something that made you feel slightly uncomfortable. Don't think of something that was really, really, really distressing. So from, let's say, a 10 would be something really, really distressing. Pick something that's like a 4. So something that was mildly annoying or mildly upsetting. We want to just practice this skill, so we don't want to practice on something really difficult. And we're going to do these 3 things. We're going to first give this feeling a name. We're going to call it something. And then we're going to see what it looks like. So we're going to give it a color and a shape and a texture. And then we're going to normalize that we have this feeling, right? So we're going to tell ourselves that having this feeling makes us human beings with a heart who care. And then the next step is to show ourselves some kindness in this moment of struggle. So again, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes during this exercise and I will walk you through it. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you can also just pick a spot in front of you to just look at, or you can also follow the slides. They will walk you through that as well. So just start to come into a comfortable seat again. And start to think back to this memory that was maybe slightly difficult for you, some discomfort. And try to really bring that up in your body slightly by thinking about it. And so the first thing we're going to do is to just see, what would you call this feeling or this experience? And so this can be as simple as just saying this is stress, or this is anger, or this is hurt. Or physical, you can name the physical sensation. This is a headache. This is nausea. Whatever you might want to label this feeling or this experience. This hurts. And now see where in your body you feel it. Do you feel it all over? So it's sort of running all over your body? Or Do you feel it in one particular spot in your body, like your head or your heart? See if you can notice where it is in your body. And don't try to make it go away right now, right? Just let it be there. Make some space for it to be there. And if it moves, let it move. And if it stays in one spot, it can just stay in one spot. And then see if you can give it a color. And that might feel a little different. Maybe you haven't given your emotions a color before. And maybe it doesn't have a color, and that's okay as well, right? But maybe it does have a color. And then see what kind of shape it might have. So is it sort of a solid shape that sits somewhere, like in your stomach? Or is it more of a shapeless or liquid kind of feeling that sort of goes throughout your whole body? Or something else like a tingling that you cannot quite name the shape? And see what kind of texture it has. Is it really smooth or is it really spiky? Does the feeling stop somewhere? Are there ends to it? And then normalize for yourself that you have this feeling. So just say to yourself, having this feeling means that I'm a human being who cares. I'm not alone in having this feeling. This feeling is part of being a teenager, and other kids struggle just like me. Or other adults struggle just like me. And then see if you can send your breath to that feeling. Just make some space for it, allow for it to be there. And maybe you want to use some supportive touch, and that might feel a little odd at first, but maybe see if you can place a hand on your heart or one hand over the other, or one hand on your stomach. You can also place your hand on the spot in your body where you feel that feeling most strongly. And then see what you would say to a good friend who was going through this. And if nothing really comes to mind, maybe you just want to say to yourself, may I be kind to myself? And now taking another deep breath in and a long breath out. And then slowly blinking your eyes open and coming back to the room. And so the big takeaway here is to try and create some space for all of your feelings. And while you do that, being kind to yourself, because that is not easy. But the more we are able to practice making space for all of our feelings, what happens is that it's much easier for us to be with those uncomfortable emotions. And we are starting to notice that having an uncomfortable emotion is not always an emergency, right? That we can have these feelings and not necessarily have to get rid of them immediately. They can be there, but they don't overwhelm us anymore, right? And that takes some practice. And that's especially why I said to practice that with something fairly small first. And the reason why we did all of these things by observing it and labeling it and giving it a shape and a color is, again, to create a little bit of separation between yourself and this feeling. You are not this feeling, right? You're containing that feeling in your body, but you are not that feeling. And by giving it a name and a color and a shape and seeing what it looks like, we're again trying to observe it a little bit like we did with our thoughts. Okay, so now we're back at the big question, right? Which was, if you did not have these painful thoughts and feelings, and if everyone you knew maybe would like you no matter what you did, what would you do with your life? And here, the actual big question that I would add to this is, and can you do these things now, these things that you really want to do, these things that you care about, and take your thoughts and feelings with you as you do that? So here the question is, what do you value in life, right? And a value is basically a guidepost for how you want to live your life. It's sort of like heading west. You're never going to sort of reach a value and check it off your list and say, now I'm done with it, right? That is a goal. So a goal might be you want to finish high school. And so you've achieved that goal and you check it off the list. And a value for that might be learning, right? Or education. And that you can never stop learning over your life. If that's a value you care about, you can always explore new things where you might learn something new. And so there are a lot of different values out there, and there are no real right or wrong values. I've just put a couple on here just to give you a little bit of a taste of what I mean when I say value, right? So some people might have a value of curiosity, right? To be really curious and open-minded. Some people might have a value of fun and humor, right? To be really fun-loving and engage in fun-filled activities. Some people might really care about conformity, being really respectful and obedient of rules and obligations. Some people really care about fitness. And there are a lot of different other values out there, right? Like adventure and kindness and honesty. And sometimes these values might clash with one another and we might have to prioritize, right? But this is something that we can really explore for ourselves. What is it that I really truly value? And am I living in line with those values? And so when you get really stuck, right, when you feel like you're not doing certain things because these thoughts and feelings are getting in the way, can you ask yourself, what is a small step that I can take that would move me towards something that I value, something that I care about, something that makes my life meaningful, right? That could be friendships or sportsmanship, right? Or creativity. Another question you can ask yourself is, what is a small thing that I can do to not listen to my unhelpful thoughts and feelings and do something that actually brings meaning into my life, right? So not just doing something for the sake of not listening to your thoughts and feelings, but doing something that would actually bring more meaning to your life. And you can also ask yourself just simply, if I did not have this painful thought or feeling, what would I actually do then? So we have a little example here, and you can put the answers in the chat if you would like. Here we have Tom, and he's really nervous about meeting new people, and he worries that people won't like him. But he really likes video games, and he really likes playing with other people. But he avoids doing that. He always plays by himself because he thinks that other people would make fun of him or wouldn't want to play with him. So what is a small step maybe that Tom could take to move him in the direction of something that he cares about? Because if I told Tom now, you know what, Tom, I think you should open up a Twitch account and stream all of your video games, and then maybe you'll meet new people and start playing with them, he might say, that's too much, right? That's too much for me to do right now. So what is something small maybe that he could do? Does anyone have an idea and want to put it in the chat? If not, I have some ideas, so it's not a big problem. But we want to start with something small, right? We don't want to overwhelm us. Okay, so here we have one answer. See if there's a club at school that has other video enthusiasts. Yeah, definitely, right? So at school, there are some familiar people, so that might be a little bit easier. Exactly. Or maybe ask one friend that he has who he knows also plays video games to see if he wants to play with him, right? Taking one small step. Because with the value, you're never gonna just sort of check it off the list anyway. Play a one-on-one game. Yeah, exactly. So you can play video games with family members. Yeah, you can start with something small because you're always moving towards that value. So if his value is friendship, right, he can work on that in small ways over time. Okay. So here's the big fourth and last takeaway. Remind yourself of what really truly matters to you, and then move towards that goal, or not goal, I'm sorry, move towards that value and take small steps, right? This little guy is not going to reach the ocean in one step. It's okay to take small steps. So here we're back at this little girl, and she's driving her bus through life, right? And she still has all of these passengers on the bus. But the more she acts and takes action based on what she truly values, the quieter these voices become, right? They might not go away completely. Every now and then she might, encounter a completely new situation and might throw her off. And these passengers might get unruly again and start saying things to her that she doesn't like to hear and that feel really hard and really upsetting. But now she knows she doesn't have to listen to them. And the less she listens to them, the less unruly they will become. They will quieten down a little bit. And so here's the big summary. So the first takeaway is that experiencing difficult emotions is part of being human, and whatever you're experiencing, you're not alone in this. The second big takeaway is try to find a way to create a little bit of space between yourself and your thoughts. And the third takeaway, make space for all of your feelings. And that is really, really hard. So be kind to yourself when you do. And then the fourth takeaway is remind yourself of what matters to you and try to move towards that and just take a small step. Okay, so now I think we're open for questions. I have, I'm sorry, I wanted to share this. This is very important. If things get really very overwhelming, so we have thoughts or feelings that feel very overwhelming, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to do any of these things on our own, right? It's so much easier to do any of these things with someone else. So if any of you experience really difficult thoughts and feelings, please reach out to a trusted adult, like a teacher or a parent, or chat or call the teen line. Or if you have any thoughts about suicide, wanting to end your own life, please call the suicide prevention hotline, or again, speak to a trusted adult. I wanted to say all of the skills that I presented here are based on acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a science-based treatment for a range of emotional distress, just in case you're interested to look into that more. And I have a couple last questions for you, but we might do that at the very end. Here are a couple other resources. We will put all of these resources in an email and send them to everyone who signed up, and also a recording of the webinar if you wanted to go back into it. All of the skills and sort of more than that, right? This is just sort of a little sliver into those skills, will be in this book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. I did not write this book. I have no associations with that book. I just know and read it that it's also based on these skills and this form of treatment. And so if you're interested in that more, this is one to look into. And I know it's also at the LA Library. If you're interested in practicing the self-compassion break, you can look at that website with that QR code. But if you cannot do it right now, don't worry, we will send the link around as well. That's a great self-compassion break for teens, specifically from the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley. And the Leaves on a Stream exercise, you can just type Leaves on a Stream into YouTube and a bunch of videos will show up. This one in particular you can find by using that QR code. And again, we'll send it around in an email. And then last but not least, please follow the UCLA Care Center on Instagram at UCLA Care Center, or at Twitter at Care Center. We post all kinds of interesting science-backed ways to better handle anxiety and stress. And we have resources in our websites for families, for youth, for teachers, I'm so sorry, and also for clinicians. Okay, so thank you so much. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us next time. I think next time will be specifically on anxiety and sleep. And we'll definitely be advertising that on our website, and again on the Twitter account and the Instagram account. Okay, so I hope everyone has a good night. And I will hopefully see you again some point soon.